I was just a boy when it all happened in the village of Ogbira, a small settlement nestled between rolling hills and ancient baobab trees. The air was always thick with the scent of wood smoke and the distant hum of drums, as life in our village was deeply rooted in tradition and reverence for the spirits of the land. But everything changed the day Okem, the wealthiest trader in the village, desecrated the sacred baobab tree. Okem was no ordinary man. He was sharp-tongued and proud. His wealth displayed in the way he dressed and the fine things he surrounded himself with. His compound was the largest in Ogbira, with cattle, farmland, and a granary that could feed the entire village twice over. Yet, despite his blessings, Okem was greedy and arrogant. The elders often warned us about the Iponri, the spirits believed to dwell in the old baobab trees. These spirits were said to be the guardians of balance, punishing those who disrespected the natural order. We were forbidden from cutting the wood of the baobab, much less uprooting it. But Okem, in his hubris, decided otherwise. It all began during the planting season when Okem declared that he needed to expand his farmland. One of the sacred baobabs stood on the edge of his property, and despite the warnings from Baba Emeka, the oldest and wisest elder in the village, Okem ordered the tree to be felled. Spirits. Okem laughed, his booming voice echoing in the meeting square. Do spirits harvest yams? Do spirits pay taxes to the chief? That land belongs to me, and I will do with it as I please. No one dared argue further. Okem's workers, afraid of losing their jobs, reluctantly brought their axes to the tree. The villagers gathered to watch from a distance, murmuring prayers for the spirit's forgiveness. When the first axe struck the baobab's trunk, a cold wind swept through the village. I still remember how the leaves on the tree shook violently. Though there was no storm, the workers hesitated, but Okem shouted at them to continue. By nightfall, the ancient tree had been reduced to a stump, its mighty branches scattered across the field. At first, it seemed as if nothing would happen. Okem expanded his farm and even boasted about the fertile soil he had gained. But then the misfortunes began. It started subtly. The goats in his compound began to die, one after another, without any sign of illness. His prize cow, Ez, the one he paraded during festivals, fell into a deep ditch and broke its legs. Still, Okem dismissed these events as coincidences. But soon, the calamities became harder to ignore. One night, during the village moonlight dance, Okem's younger son, Chikia, suddenly collapsed. His body twisted unnaturally, and he cried out in a voice that was not his own, "The tree will rise. The tree will rise." Panic spread through the crowd. Baba Emeka was summoned, and after hours of prayers and incantations, Chikia stopped convulsing, though he remained unconscious for 3 days. The villagers whispered that the spirits of the baobab were angry, but Okem dismissed it as the ramblings of superstitious fools. Then came the dreams. Many in the village began reporting strange visions at night. They dreamt of a shadowy figure, walking among the baobab trees, its eyes glowing like embers. The figure would call out names, always ending with Okem's. My mother told me she saw it too, and for weeks, she refused to let me wander near the farmland. Okem, however, remained defiant. He claimed these were tales spread by those jealous of his success. But one evening, as he returned from the market, something happened that even he could not explain. It was dusk when Okem's servants heard him screaming from the edge of his farmland. They rushed to his aid and found him trembling, his eyes wide with terror. He kept mumbling about seeing a figure by the baobab stump, a tall, shadowy being with branches for arms and roots for feet. He insisted he was being followed, though no one else could see anything. The workers carried him back to his compound, where he locked himself in his hut and refused to come out for days. The final blow came during the harvest festival. The entire village had gathered at the square, dressed in their finest attire, to celebrate the yam's abundance. Okem, though noticeably thinner and more withdrawn, attended as well, hoping to restore his reputation. As the drummers played and the dancers leapt, a sudden hush fell over the crowd. All eyes turned to the far end of the square, where the ground had begun to crack. Slowly, a single shoot emerged, a tender green sprout, no taller than a child's finger. But as we watched in horror, the sprout grew. It twisted and thickened, its bark turning dark and gnarled. Within moments, it had become a young baobab tree, standing eerily in the middle of the square. Okem screamed and ran toward the tree, wielding a machete, but as he raised his hand to strike, he collapsed. Baba Emeka declared that the spirits had spoken. Okem's body was carried to his compound, where he lay unconscious for 3 days, much like his son before him. When he finally woke, he was a changed man. Gone was the arrogant trader who laughed at tradition. Okem sold his farmland and devoted the rest of his days to tending the village shrine and honouring the spirits. The baobab tree in the square still stands to this day, its branches spreading wide as if to remind us of the power of the Iponri. People say if you stand under it at night, you can hear whispers in the wind, warning us to respect the balance of nature. I was there when it all happened, and even now, as an old man, I cannot forget the sight of that tree growing before our eyes. It is a story I tell my grandchildren, not to scare them, but to teach them that pride and greed have no place in Ogbira or anywhere else, for that matter.